Hello, is this Fred?
Yes, it is.
Hello, Fred. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Thank God. All right, and everyone's great to see you all. Thank you all for being here. So, if you missed our hello, Lois. If you missed the Purim celebration last night, it was the Purim spiel was quite funny. So you can find it if you're interested. I'll try to remember to give you the link.
I would like that very much. And I was watching 3 others at one time.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's
It was crazy, but it was good.
I'm very talk about multitasking. So the Purim spiel starts somewhere around the hold on, I'm gonna put this in the chat. Sorry everybody, can't find the chat. There it is.
It was strange. I could not get onto yours.
That's weird.
It was very strange.
Because I couldn't believe the number of people that showed up. We had something like 50 at the height of it. We had something like 54 people on the.
That's wonderful.
Which was amazing. So so I just put the link in the chat. So feel free to grab it. The Megillah reading starts at around a half an hour or so in. Right after I actually did sing the song that Lori suggested for me. So if we have time today, I'll sing it for you before we sign off. And then the Megillah reading takes about an hour and 20 minutes. So look about like an hour 45 minutes or so into the beginning, to find the Purim spiel. But the Purim spiel I thought it was a great success, considering
it was hilarious.
Considering that what they had to do it on Zoom, I thought it went unbelievably well. So,
it did. It was nice.
It was fabulous.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. We have our regular Purim spiel composer, they outdid themselves. They've done this for the last couple of years. Jim Leffert and Dave Rosenthal have collaborated the last couple of years, but something about the Zoom really brought out the additional levels of creativity. All right, so so today we are going to look at the holidays, and I think what we'll do is, let me see, I need to figure out where I put the I think I may have actually just gotten rid of it, so I'll need to redo it.
Before you go into that,
yeah,
Rabbi, Jim, I never received the cheat sheet that you had created on that Excel last week.
All right, so
if you could resend that to me, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Give me a second. I'll do it right. I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll resend it to everybody. I wonder why.
I didn't get it either.
Who didn't get it?
I didn't get one.
I didn't get it.
Did anybody get it?
Yeah, I think I get it, but I didn't try to open it because my printer doesn't work and I couldn't print it.
Because I really thought that I had sent it out, but anyway.
You had. I think you
did.
did.
Yeah. I mean,
never hurts to send it again.
Do you need a printer to use it?
No, you don't need a printer. You can just get it on the. You can just get on the.
I didn't get it either.
All right. So you can just click on the thing that I just put in the. Can
you put on again?
I just did. It's in the chat.
Where's the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat. So just open up the chat and you'll see that.
Could you? I can't find it in the chat.
Oh.
All right, I'll send it out to everyone again. But
okay.
Yeah. I'll send it out to
Can you
everyone
put
again.
that on the screen again, the HPP?
It's on the chat. So go in. Are you on a computer, Ellen?
Yeah,
All right. So go down to either at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll either have a
I did it, but nothing came up.
Well,
Okay.
it doesn't, the link is there, but it didn't open for me.
Oh, it didn't open. Let me see if it opens.
Yeah, mine didn't open either.
Oh, it opens for me, but that's not very helpful now, is it?
No,
I got it and I printed it out.
Great. All right. So I'll send it to everyone. I'll try to send it as a Excel document as well as a link. All right. Yeah, very happy to do that. So yeah. So any questions? Any other sort of overall questions you have for me?
How do you do it from the chat? You just click on the chat?
Yeah.
But nothing happens in my computer.
Oh, I don't know then, Ellen. We'll have to worry about that later. Okay. All right. So yeah, you can save it in Excel, but if you bookmark it, if you bookmark the Google Doc, it'll always be available to you. And if you have your own Google Docs, you can save it as a Google Doc, and then it's in there as a Google Doc.
Thank you. I got it. I got it from the chat.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay.
So you don't have to resend it to me.
Well, I'll resend it to everyone because I think for other people it wasn't working from the chat.
right. Well, I don't have Excel, so that may be why it didn't open.
Yeah,
Neither do I.
if you don't have Excel, Google Docs will definitely work. I don't have Excel either on my home computer. That's among the reasons why I use Google Docs. All right, so holidays. So we're going to talk about holidays a little bit today, just to sort of because I was sort of inspired by the fact that we're holidays. Oh my gosh, we're in the holiday season again, right? Today is Purim, and so we're supposed to be drunk. In case you didn't know.
Definitely not.
Yeah, I know. It's a work day.
We're supposed to get drunk.
Yes, actually, according to the rabbis, you're supposed to get drunk enough on Purim so you can't tell the difference between blessed be Mordecai and cursed be Haman, right? It gets to, I think, the degree to which it's a really complicated holiday. It's a very complicated holiday, Purim, that we tend to make into a simple holiday, right? A little bit like Halloween in that regard. It's, sometimes people do compare it to Halloween because we wear costumes and so on and so forth, right? But the sort of serious parts of, say, Halloween, right, where we are really supposed to, face the reality of death and think about mortality, right, has been sort of turned into trick or treat, right, and silly costumes and a lot of candy, right? I think Purim is not so different, right? We tend to have a lot of candy, at least Hamantaschen, right? But this sort of injunction that the holiday is so confusing that really the only response to it is to get drunk, right? Is kind of an interesting one, right? But we're not going to talk about Purim today, even though today is Purim, right? And why would we not talk about Purim today? Does anyone have any idea? I mean, I'm not.
Because we had enough of Purim.
Shabbat.
Like,
It's
God,
Shabbat.
we've done enough of Purim yesterday. Yeah, we're done. Exactly. Go ahead.
Very minor holiday.
It's
a
Shabbat.
minor holiday. Great. Go ahead, Alan. What else?
It's Shabbat.
No. Well, today is not Shabbat, but
Tonight.
and tonight will be Shabbat, right? But what's interesting, right, is that Purim never falls out on Shabbat, right? And so you'll notice in the Shabbat prayer books, they'll be in the Modim prayer, right? The Modim prayer is the part of the Amidah where we say thank you, right? We say, thanks to God for all the miracles in our lives, right? So that's an appropriate place to put the prayer called Al Hanisim, right? Which is the prayer that we say on Hanukkah, right? And on Purim, right? Those two, right? And we say that prayer because these were periods in which the Jewish people experienced miracles, according to our legends, right? And so we want to thank God for those miracles, right? In the prayer book, in the Shabbat prayer book, you'll see Al Hanisim for Hanukkah is often included, even though, of course, we only say it once a year, right? On Shabbat. There's only one, it's every once in a while you get 2 Shabbats for Hanukkah, but generally you have one, right? But Purim never shows up on Shabbat, right? That's sort of a quirk of the calendar. So all these reasons are valid, right? But the primary reason why we're not going to talk about Purim today, right, is because it's a non-biblical holiday, or at least a non-Torahitic holiday, right? You will not see one word devoted to Purim in the Torah. Right? You won't see anything devoted to Hanukkah in the Torah. And you won't see anything devoted to, like, say, Tish B'Av, right? Or certainly not to Holocaust Remembrance Day, right? In the Torah, right? These are holidays that got instituted later in Jewish history. And so the thing to remember about the Jewish calendar, the biggest thing to remember about the Jewish calendar, is that it is a lunar solar calendar. So the lunar part means that we celebrate the new moon every month, right? Every month we celebrate the new moon.
Rosh Chodesh.
The Rosh Chodesh, exactly. Which means that every month, right, corresponds to the cycle of the moon.
Right.
Right? So you always know when the full moon will be. You know those calendars you can get that have the full moon on them, right? If you have a Jewish calendar, you don't need one of those, right? Because the first of pretty much every month is the new moon, right? And the 15th of every month is the full moon, right? So I have on my watch, right, on my fancy dancy Apple Watch, I have the Gregorian date is up in the right hand corner, right, and then I have the Hebrew date at the bottom, which is very useful. So I know, right, today is the 14th of Adar because it's Purim, right, which means that tomorrow is the full moon. And I also know that tomorrow is, oh my vault, it's a month before Pesach, I'm in big trouble. Right? I've got to start cleaning the house, getting rid of the chametz. Right? I got to stop buying more chametz and start, all right. So that's very important to remember. So everything revolves around.
How can you not buy any chametz if you've got Shabbat? You have to have a challah.
Oh no, I mean things like pasta and
just checking.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean that this is the balancing act, right? You have to have chametz in your house until the very
very end.
And this year especially, it's gonna be complicated. I think, right, that that you have to burn your chametz on Friday because Passover starts on a Saturday night this year. So Friday night, right, we can't really have, you're not really supposed to eat matzah, right, before Passover, but you're already not supposed to have any challah in your house on Friday night. So, what do you do? All very complicated. All right. So,
no, that's right. The first Seder is Saturday night.
It's first Seder is Saturday night. All right. So, so the holidays that we're going to be looking at, right, are are all going to be tied to months, to days of a month. Right? They will all be tied to days of the month, to a month and to the day of the month. All right, so we'll start here on, this is chapter 28 of the book of Numbers. And I'm just gonna make this a little smaller. Not that small, it's a little too small. All right, there we go. All right. All right, so the first thing to know about the holidays, right, is that the Jewish holidays all refer to, in the Torah, right? There's usually some sort of reference to what kind of sacrifice you bring. Right, and so that sort of begins to, sort of to beg the question, well, what's the point of all these sacrifices? Why does God need these sacrifices, right? And as with many things, as we discussed in terms of prayer, right, I think a relatively fundamental sort of understanding of human religiosity, right, is that it's really not God that needs these things, right? It's really about us, right? It's really about humans. And so, but humans tend to sort of say, no, God is demanding this of us in order for God to be in our midst, so that we can experience the presence of God. This is not just Judaism, right? This is many other religions as well, right? So we sort of externalize this onto God. But this is how we have God become present in our midst. Right? So there's a sort of a sense, right, that we are living, right, and we are actively searching for God's presence, right? Actively trying to arrange for God to be present in us. So in a sense, right, that it's no different today, right? It's just that we use different ways of doing it. We don't tend to sacrifice animals anymore. It's not our thing, right? And so much of rabbinic Judaism, right, is about, on one hand, recalling, right, that this is what our ancestors did in pre-rabbinic times, and also being clear that we don't do this anymore, right? We do. Oh, I'm sorry, I unmuted your dog there. So, all right. So this chapter about holidays in Numbers is going to start with sacrifices, right? So command the children of Israel, say to them, my food, right, which is presented to me for offerings made by fire of a sweet savor unto me, shall you observe to offer me in its due season. All right. So the final word of this verse, in verse 2, b'moado. So this word that root there, moed, that is the Hebrew word for season, right? It's also or festivals or holidays, right? So this is how we call the moed. Right? So the order of the Talmud that has to do with holidays is Masechet Moed, right? Or not Masechet, but tractate. Yeah, not Masechet, but the order, right? The order of Moed.
Right? Moed means season.
I'm sorry.
Moed means season.
Moed means season or holiday or festival, right? Right. And so And so what they start with here, very important, right, is that in a sense, every day is a holiday. Right? In a very real sense, every day is a holiday, right? Because every day we should be bringing, according to the Torah, we should be bringing a sacrifice, right? We should be bringing an offering to God, right? And when should we do it? We already know that, right? One lamb shalt thou offer in the morning, right? That is what we now know as is the shacharit, right? What now instead of animal offerings, we bring prayer, right? And the other lamb shalt thou offer at dusk, right? That's the mincha, right? So every day, in a sense, right, is a holiday, right? So every day we need to do the sort of basic upkeep of keeping God's presence, right? So for some of us today, that might be a daily prayer, right? For some of us, it might be meditation. For others of us, there's a whole bunch of different spiritual practices that people have. Go ahead, Lois.
But my question is, were the lamb sacrifices so that the high priest can eat?
That too, right? That part of the point of it, right, was that part of those animals would be offered up to God, and other parts of the animals would be eaten by the priests, right? That would be the maintenance. Right?
So nowadays we just have to make a donation.
Right. I mean, in Judaism, right? There's there's sort of an ever growing fight, right? Should there be dues in the synagogue that people should pay, or should it be a voluntary system, sort of like in the church, right? And some people think it should just be voluntary and people should pay what they can. Other people think there should be dues, and everyone, in order to be a member, you got to really, pay up, right? That's a conversation that's going on in a lot of synagogues, right?
I was with both types.
Yeah. Right.
The first one
right.
was
And there's a lot of
voluntary.
synagogues that need, right? Most synagogues can't survive if it's just dues, right?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. All right. So
Thank you.
right. So that, but I think what's important here, right, is that in Judaism, in rabbinic Judaism, right, we've separated those things out, right? We no longer have this sort of notion that we're going to bring offerings to the synagogue, right, as a way to keep God close, right? We bring offerings to the synagogue so that we have a rabbi, so that we have a building to pray in, so we have Hebrew school teachers, so that we have, someone to take care of that building, so on and so forth, right? But the actual presence of God, right, that is something that happens independent of that sort of maintenance of the physical space. And so here, what you have, right, it is, and notice here, right, that it's a continual burnt offering, right? So it's, right, it happens all the time, right? All right, so therefore, and thereon and therefore, I'm not going to go up a big part of this, right? But what's the next piece, right? The next piece is Shabbat, right? So what is the most important holiday in Judaism? Is it Yom Kippur?
No, it's Shabbos.
Purim? No, it's Shabbos, right? The first holiday, right? The first moed that gets mentioned, right? It's not really a moed, but the point is, the first holiday that we really have to think about, right, is Shabbos, right? We give an additional offering on Shabbat, right? Another piece of ourselves. We add a little bit, right? And in the synagogue, that gets translated into the Musaf prayer. So we stay a little bit longer in shul, right? Or, functionally, of course, very often we don't, right? We show up just for Musaf and Kiddush. Who needs to sit there for 3 hours? Who has his place for that? Some of us, we do. The rabbi's paid to be there, so he's got to be there. But the rest of us, no, only if we really like it, right? Right, but again, so to sort of put this on a continuum, right, is to remember, right, that Shabbat, and we'll talk about Shabbat in more detail at another time, right? But Shabbat is a holiday in a very real sense, right? And whenever we have a holiday and we want to say to somebody, Happy Pesach, right? Or pretty soon we're going to be saying Happy Pesach, right? If, this year Pesach happens right after Shabbat, right? According to the rabbis, we should always wish someone a good Shabbos before we wish them a Pesach Sameach, right? Because Shabbos is Tadir, right? Shabbos is the one that happens every week. Pesach, it happens once a year. It's not unimportant, right? But it's not as important as Shabbos because Shabbos comes every week. So we give our primary kavod, our primary honor to Shabbos.
Can I say something?
Please, go ahead, Carol.
I'm remembering in Abraham Joshua Heschel's book, The Sabbath,
Yes.
I was struck by him saying, the first thing that was considered sacred was Shabbat.
Yeah.
It was about time, not a place. That was the first thing that was called sacred in Judaism was Shabbat. So it was about time.
Yeah.
He actually called it was sort of an architecture of time.
Right.
In Judaism.
Right.
And that had a lot of resonance for me.
It's a huge resonance, right? And it's very important, right? It's a very important concept, right? Now Heschel, of course, is writing at a particular time in a particular context, right? In the aftermath of the destruction, right, of European Jewry, right? Of the sort of obliteration of place, right? And he's also writing in the 50s and 60s, right, in the U.S., right, which was the time of the the sort of awesome Jewish edifice complex.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so which is not to say that what he's saying isn't true, because I think it is, but a lot of the motivation that he had for that argument that he made, right, was this sort of twofold. This is I don't remember to what degree this is my own little formulation and to what degree I've heard it from other people, so I apologize that I can't offer you a reference to this. But to the sort of dual loss or the dual emphasis on space, I guess I would say, right, that there was a sort of a nostalgia for the shtetl, right, as the place of true Judaism, and then also this sort of emphasis on these suburban synagogues, right, that maybe didn't offer exactly the same kind of Jewish experience that they.
I beg to differ.
Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
Nobody wants to go back to the shtetl.
Oh, I agree. I'm not saying, I don't think people can go back to it.
Those who have never lived in the shtetl, they couldn't wait to get out, whatever it was. So that's absurd.
I think you are saying the same thing, Sandy, right? I think that anyone who wanted to be in the shtetl, right, there was a sort of a nostalgia. There was a kind of primarily of people who hadn't been in the shtetl, right? There was a book called Life is with People, a study of the shtetl. So to a certain degree, I mean, there was a sort of this sort of emphasis on these spaces, right? And Heschel wanted to say, no, look, the whole survival of Judaism was based on the fact that we were able, as a religious culture, to sanctify time, right? Wherever we happen to be, whatever space we were in, right? We were able to sanctify time within that context, right? The emphasis on home rituals for Jews, right, is a part of that sanctity in time, right? Because any dining room table can become the altar of the temple, right? Of the temple in Jerusalem. right? It's what they call Mikdash Me'at, right? The miniature temple. But but thank you, Carol. It's really important to say, right? Because that also gets to this whole chapter, right? It doesn't say in this chapter where you're bringing all these things, right? It says that you're bringing them when. When are you bringing them? Not where are you bringing them? Right? The only place that it mentions, which I'm just noticing today for the first time in a while. I haven't thought about this for a while, right? In verse 6, it says it's a continual burnt offering, which was offered in Mount Sinai, right? So,
Excuse me, which is not considered to be sacred.
Right.
That's
exactly it.
I find this so interesting.
Yes.
It does go back to Parsha Truma with a portable fabric sanctuary.
Exactly.
That is just so phenomenal in Judaism. Ours is portable.
It's
you can
portable.
pack it up, schlep along.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that here, Carol, Mount Sinai, right, is not a place. It's a time, right? Mount Sinai means when we first received Torah from God, right, we immediately began offering these we made these offerings in order to continue to have God's presence the way we did at Mount Sinai.
Right. The idea was not to make Mount Sinai a pilgrimage spot that everybody would go to. No.
Exactly. No.
No.
Right. But wherever we happen to be,
yeah,
right, could be Mount Sinai, right? So wherever we read Torah, right? So every synagogue, every shtibel, right? Every living room where we, these days, the Orthodox community now, many people are organizing, little chavrutas, or chavrutot, right, in homes, right? So little groups of Jews will get together to daven on Shabbos because they can't gather in synagogues. So anywhere there was a Torah scroll, right, can become Mount Sinai. All right. So what's the next one? Right. The next one is verse 11, and in your new moons. Right. So what's the next? Can't really. I don't think I can make the argument, right, that Rosh Chodesh is more important than Pesach. Right. I can make the argument, right, that Shabbat is more important than Pesach, but I can't make the argument that Rosh Chodesh is, right. But Rosh Chodesh is the next one, right. So excuse me one second. I really need a glass of water. I'll be right back. Okay, that's better. All right, just had to wet the whistle a little bit there. So you'll notice that the order, right, of the holidays as they are listed here in Parashat Pinchas, right, and that's where we are, is in terms of frequency, right? So the first 8 verses have to do with the daily offering. Happens every day, right? Then we deal with Shabbat. Happens every week, right? Then we deal with Rosh Chodesh. Happens every month, except when do we not celebrate Rosh Chodesh? Does anyone know? Only 1 month a year.
No, I don't know.
It's a trick question because it's also a Rosh.
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah, exactly. Oh, there we
Yeah.
go. All right, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that. But I did.
All right, but we don't get there, right? So interesting, right? And that brings up another question, right? Or another set of distinctions. So once we're done with the holidays that happen more frequently than once a year, right? And those 3 are just the daily offering, Shabbat, and Rosh Chodesh. once we get to those, right, then we have 2 cycles of holidays, which is really important to remember. And they kind of function in, they are sort of complementary one to the other. The first one, the first set, right, is the pilgrimage holidays. And now this, we are most familiar with pilgrimage now, of course, in a Muslim context, right? Because Muslims are enjoined, you know, once in their life to make it to Mecca, right? And to do Hajj. So that's the same word in Arabic as we use for our pilgrimage holidays, which are called Chag. So I don't speak Arabic, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing Hajj correctly. That's just sort of the Americanized version. But it's the same word, right? And the same idea, what we do at Sukkot, right? Where we do hakafot, right? We walk around our prayer space, right? That's what the Muslims
Hi, sweetheart.
That's what the Muslims are doing in Mecca.
Yeah,
right?
but I
They're
can,
walking around the Kaaba. So it's very important to remember, right, that that this is these are very, what's the word I'm looking for? These are physical. These are supposed to be physical experiences, right? So whereas the daily offering, the Shabbat offering, the Rosh Chodesh, right? Okay, you know, we've substituted prayer for sacrifice, right? We no longer offer animals at the altar, right? Instead, we bring ourselves to shul, or we daven at home, right? And we're, you know, it's a spiritual practice, right? It's not necessarily. I would argue, right, that Jewish prayer is a semi-contact sport, but that's another issue, right? But when we're talking about Chag, right, that there are physical things that we are enjoying to do, right? It has an effect on our, you know, we're supposed to go to Jerusalem, right? It says in the book of Deuteronomy, right, 3 times a year you shall appear before me, right, and make sure you bring something with you. Right? No, hey,
Sorry.
I mean, again, you know, does God really need the food? No, right? Right? Why do we bring stuff with us? Right? Don't show up empty-handed. And it's not just those venal priests, you know, who are looking for a handout, right? You know, there's a spiritual practice about offering, right? About bringing of yourself.
But God also likes the smells.
Absolutely. Yeah, but at least that's what it says in the Torah. I have my doubts. I think humans like the smell, right? You know, roasted meat.
They don't
Better than an
last.
abattoir, you know. So, I'm just not sure, Ellen. Right? Again, I'm just not sure. Any time in a liturgical or a sacred text where it says that God demands this, right? Maybe I'm too much of a functionalist, right? But it just feels to me like people have realized that this is how we feel the presence of God. If we do these things, we will feel the presence of God, right? God doesn't just, you know, we don't feel the presence of God just by showing up, or especially we don't show up. I mean, I actually think that these days, right, it does. That's what it is, right? Very much today, right? We often feel the presence of God by showing up in an intentional way, right? We show up at shul, and the fact that we come together at like I felt this very much last night, right? You know, that there was there was definitely a spiritual presence amidst the gathering for Purim, right? how did that happen? You know, it happened because we all showed up with this sort of intentionality of being. Right. It didn't involve, we didn't need to bring any animals, you know. Some of us had animals in the house, you know. All
Not
right.
a sacrifice. I'm not sacrificing.
We're not, no, I'm not sacrificing my dogs, not by any stretch of the imagination. All right, so good. So the first cycle of holidays is the Hag, right? It's the pilgrimage holidays. What are those pilgrimage holidays?
Sukkot.
Sukkot, right?
Passover,
Sukkot, Passover, and what's the third one?
Shavuot.
Shavuos, exactly, exactly. Okay, good. All right, so what is the first month?
Nissan,
Nisan. Nisan is the first month, right? We are 15 days away from the first month right now. All right, another quirk of our holiday system, right, is that the first month of the year, Nisan, is in the spring.
Yeah.
Right?
Passover.
But when do we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the new
in the
year?
fall.
We celebrate it in the 7th month.
What is the 7th month?
Tishrei.
Tishrei?
Tishrei is the 7th month. All right, and somewhere that, you know, you can go online anywhere you want. It's not, this is not a requirement, it's a suggestion. It's just, you know, get a Hebrew calendar, get used to what the Hebrew months are. It's just very helpful to sort of keep yourself on track.
Passover is in Nissan?
Nisan starts in 15 days. It's the first month of the year is Nisan.
So Passover is always in Nissan?
Passover is the 15th day of Nisan, right? All right. So the one thing, so really the two pilgrimage holidays, right, that we really focus on in Judaism. There's actually, believe it or not, there's actually 4 pilgrimage holidays, not 3. A little confusing. Okay. And really only 2 of them begin on the 15th of the month, right? The first one is Pesach, and it's sort of satellite one. It's satellite, you know, its partner in crime, so to speak, is Shavuot, which happens 50 days later. Has anyone ever heard of the Pentecost?
Is that the 4th one?
What?
Is that the 4th one?
No. Pentecost is Shavuot. In the Christian calendar, you know, what we know as Shavuot would be known as the Pentecost, right? And Pentecost, right, 50 days after Passover, or in the Christian tradition, 50 days after Easter, right? They have different obviously significances in the two calendars, right? But Passover is very linked to Shavuot.
Does Shavuot have something to do with the Omer?
Yes. So right. So the Omer is actually the counting, right? We count every day from Pesach until we get to Shavuot, right? And there's a bunch of different customs associated with this, right? In the Christian calendar, right, before Easter, there's Lent, where Christians often abstain from certain pleasurable activities, like eating chocolate, right, or other sometimes more serious things, right? In Judaism, right, we don't have that, right? But after Passover, right, in the lead up to Shavuot is supposedly a time of mourning, right? And so we count the Omer, right? Traditionally, we don't have weddings between Passover and Shavuot, except for on one day Lag BaOmer, right, for a whole bunch of reasons that we can explore another time. right? Right, but so Shavuot is sort of secondary. Now, I mean, I don't want to say it's secondary. It's not nice to say that, but but one of the reasons we know that it's a little bit less important, right, than Passover is, right, that Passover lasts how many days?
8.
8 days in the diaspora, 7 days in the land of Israel, right? We'll get into that in a little bit, right? So it lasts 7 days. It's a week-long festival, right? And how long does Shavuot last?
1.
1 day, exactly. 1 day in Israel, 2 days in the diaspora. So just by dint of it's, one of the reasons that Shavuot in liberal circles is not that big of a deal, right, is because it's a blink and you'll miss it kind of a holiday.
What's the fourth holiday that's a pilgrimage?
I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
All right, what's the other big pilgrimage holiday? Someone already said it. In the fall?
Sukkot.
Sukkot, right? And Sukkot, even though is as equally a physical experience like Passover, right, sometimes gets short shrift because it overlaps to a certain extent with the other cycle of holidays, right, the high holiday cycle, right? But again, we think of Sukkot as a single festival, but really it's 2 holidays with a week in between, right? The first one is Sukkot itself, right? And the second one is called Shmini Atzeret. Shmini Atzeret, right? Which means the gathering of the 8th day. And in the Bible, that's about what we know about it. That we're supposed to gather on the 8th day.
Get ready for Simchat Torah.
Okay, so right, so Anne is anticipating, right? In the diaspora, right? How many days of Sukkot do we have?
8.
8. Well, it's 8 days in the land of Israel, right? Including the 8th day, right? So outside of Israel, we have to add the 9th day. Oy, a 9th day. Okay, well, which is all well and good if there was some content to the holiday.
Right? You gotta build a sukkah.
But there's no, but you don't even sit, sitting in the sukkah is optional already on Shmini Atzeret.
It's supposed to eat in it.
Right, yeah, but already on Shmini Atzeret, it's, you don't have the lulav anymore, right? The lulav is gone. It's fallen apart, and the etrog has begun to sort of lose its scent. It's beginning to dry up, right? You certainly can go into the sukkah on Shmini Atzeret, but it's no longer a commandment to do so, right? There's no content, right? So you can kind of do a contentless holiday for, this is the last day of Sukkot. You do that once, right? And eventually in the diaspora, the second day of Sukkot becomes Simchat Torah.
Oh, I love that.
And Simchat Torah, and this is one of those things about our tradition, right? Is that it's in case anyone ever tells you, "Oi, Jews are so conservative; they never want to change anything. Nothing ever, it's always like no." I mean, any tradition that comes up with Simchat Torah has got to be willing to be creative and adaptable, right? Because,
oh, I love it.
Right, because it's the Sukkot is described as Man Simchatenu, right? The season of our joy. Right? Passover, just by the way, is called Zman. Oh my God. Anyway, and I can't think of the Hebrew word off the top of my head. It means the time of our freedom, right? Or time of liberation, right? But which is not to say we're not joyful, during Passover, right? But it's, we're not necessarily commanded to be happy, right? In Sukkot, you're supposed to be sameach. You're supposed to be really happy, right? So the fact that they went one further, right, and actually called the holidays the joy of Torah, Simchat Torah, right, means this is pretty heavy duty stuff. So will you see Simchat Torah in the thing we're about to read? That's a trick question.
Maybe not.
Right? I just told you, right? It came
new,
up in the
created.
diaspora, right? It came up, sometime, and it also had to come when the Torah reading cycle was fixed to be a year as opposed to 3 years. So I don't know exactly, the 7th, 8th, 9th century of the Common Era, so Simchat Torah is a relatively young holiday. It's not, we're not going to be reading about it. Okay. So you'll see, right, that in a sense, there are 4 pilgrimage holidays somehow linked to one another.
What's the fourth?
Pesach and Shavuot, right? And don't tell anyone else that I said there are 4 because no one will believe you. The Bible is very clear that there are 3. I'm just saying functionally there are 4.
What is it?
Pesach, Shavuot, that's 1 pair. Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret is another pair.
Where's the last one? What's the fourth one?
Shmini Atzeret, gathering of the 8th day.
Paris?
Shmini Atzeres, the gathering of the 8th day.
Can you say that again?
Shmini Atzeret,
The gathering of what?
the gathering on the 8th day.
Okay.
Atzeret is kind of a convocation, and Shmini is the 8th.
And Simchat Torah?
And then Simchat Torah, right, gets added, right?
Okay.
It gets added.
Shmini means 8th.
Shmini means the 8th. All right, so let's look here at the text, right? And in the first month is Nisan, the 14th day of the month, right? The evening of the 14th day, right, is the Lord's Passover, right? And so the 15th day of the month shall be a feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. So we can see here, Anne, your question about evenings versus mornings.
Uh-huh.
Right? There's a little bit of machlochet, a little bit of disagreement. How do you number the days? You number the days from the evening, right? The way we do in the beginning of Genesis, right? Or do we number the days according to the morning, as it appears to be here, right? Because the 14th day of
They'll do it on the evening.
Exactly. So the 14th day of the month, right, that's the Lord's Passover, the evening of the 14th day, right? That's when we have our Seder, right? And the 15th day, right, the morning, that is our feast, right? 7 days, right? 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten, right? The physical component of Passover is that we eat matzah. The first day shall be a holy convocation, right? And you shall do no work. Right? Just like on Shabbos, don't do any work. All right.
Except for the kitchen.
Well, actually, that's actually very important, right? The distinction between Shabbos and Chag is that on Chag you can actually cook food for that day, whereas on Shabbos all the food has to be cooked according to All right. So then, right, and it's 7 days, right, and on the 7th day will also be a holy convocation. That will also be a Mikra Kodesh, right? So the 7th day is also Chag. Okay. And then also in the day of the first fruits, the Yom HaBikurim. All right. It doesn't say here when the day of the first fruits is.
First fruits.
Right? We don't know, according to this passage in the Bible, we don't know when that is. We just know that it's the day of the first fruits, right? Which already to me signals that it's a little bit of a lower order, right? Because it doesn't say on this day of this month.
Well, as a retired farmer, you don't know. You don't know when your fruits are going to be.
Yeah.
1 year it could be this month. I mean, I had an orchard.
Yeah.
And so 1 year I'd have them
Yeah.
1 month and another, so it's very practical that they didn't put a specific date because it may not be true.
Right, exactly. And, right, but this is very interesting, right? So we have sort of two orders of holidays here, right? So one thing, another truism about the Chagim, right, about the pilgrimage holidays is that they are sort of linked to agricultural festivals, and they're also linked to seasonal type of stuff, and they're also linked to moments in the Torah, right? So Passover, right, clearly, right, is a spring festival. But Passover is primarily, right, a celebration of
Unleavened bread.
Yat Mitzrayim, right? What is Pesach? Right? Pesach is that's the day that God skipped over the houses of the Israelites, right? And destroyed the firstborn, right? That's what it was that act of liberation, right? That we're commemorating, right? And so that is a day that's fixed in time, right? Whereas Cheva is saying, I think very wisely, right, that agricultural festivals are sometimes a little bit looser because you actually have to be able to, you can't necessarily be out doing the gathering of the harvest and celebrating the fact that you've gathered the harvest at the same time, right? So there's a little bit of leeway given, at least here. Other places, not so much, right? All right. And then then we will go to the next chapter, right? What's the next one going to be?
Sukkot.
Right, very good. But it's not, right? Because here in this presentation of the holidays, right, what comes next? In the seventh month, right, on the first day of the month, what do you have?
Rosh
Hashanah, right? And that is the day. That is also the day when you don't celebrate Rosh Chodesh, right? Because we're celebrating the new year. We don't need to celebrate
The big Rosh Chodesh.
the big Rosh Chodesh, exactly. All right, and all it really says about Rosh Hashanah in this part of the Bible, right, is that it is the day of the blowing of the horn. Yom Teruah. For such a big deal in the synagogue, it's not such a big deal in this description, at least. All right, and then on the 10th day of that same month, what happens?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. And
What is the name of the second cycle?
The high holiday cycle.
It's the high holiday cycle?
So this is the high, right. So we get in, what I love about this presentation of the holidays, right? Other presentations of the holidays some of them will actually just be about the Chagim, right? Which is fine, but this one is great because this is actually our reality, right? Is that we don't ever get to do Sukkot without having just gone through the high holidays, right? So there are Jews, my teacher, Art Green, says, there's kind of two kinds of Jews. I mean, in the way that there's two kinds of people about having to do with anything, right? There's high holiday Jews and there are Chag Jews. There's the Jews that every year they do a Seder, right? But they might not show up for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? And there's others, they do a Seder, but it's, they do a Seder because you do a Seder, right? It's not because it's like this, this really important thing in their life, but they show up religiously, right, for Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So what's the point of Rosh Hashanah, right, is that we shall afflict our souls, right? The initem, V'initem et nafshotecha, right? We're going to afflict our souls. So again, these are very, so as you can tell, right? These are very capsule understandings of these holidays, right? Rosh Hashanah, what is it? Rosh Hashanah is Yom Teruah, right? We blow the horn, right? What is Yom Kippur, right? We are going to afflict our souls. So there's
Afflict our soul?
obviously afflict our souls, right? So there's obviously a lot of interpretation, a lot of room for interpretation. How do we understand these holidays? What do we do? Right? And then finally, right, on the 15th day of the month, right, we're going to have a feast, right? And so, and we won't go through it now. I don't think we're going to go through it all. But Sukkot, right, is the most complicated holiday as regards the offerings, right? Every single day of Sukkot, there's a separate sort of list of offerings that we're supposed to make. Right? By the end, I think by the end you've given like 70 bulls or something, and actually the rabbis say you give 70 bulls because there are 70 nations in the world, right? So we are actually making an offering for every single nation in the world. So we're it's a very universalist kind of a holiday. All right. So, and then that is basically what goes on right here. You can see here on the 5th day, on the 6th day, on the 7th day, right? On the 8th day, what's the 8th day? It's another, right? Bayom Hashmini Atzeret. That's all we get. That's all we get, folks. There's no other content, right? Bayom Hashmini Atzeret, right? On the 8th day, there's an Atzeret. It's remarkable how, but what's really interesting is that all of these, obviously in other places in the Torah, there's more information about what we do on these various days. But for Shmini Atzeret, not so much. So, and basically it says, right, this is what you offer, right, in the appointed seasons. Moadechem, right, on these days, right, in the appointed seasons of these, right, and there's all kinds of other offerings you can make to God, right? What are they, right? You can make vows and free will offerings and burnt offerings or meal offerings or drink offerings or peace, whatever those meant in a technical sense, right? The way I understand it, right, is that you're always welcome to offer of yourself, right? And that can be, a verbal prayer, it can be meditation, it can be visiting the sick, it can be giving tzedakah, right? It can be helping people this way or that way or another way, right? Any way that you want to give of yourself, right? There's no limit on that. Just because there's all these other things you're supposed to do, right? There's no limit to the way that you can sort of act in a positive way in the world. That can be an ongoing. But yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
Just a tiny bit of information. In the stories of King Arthur, the knights always set out for their mission, whatever it is that time, on, now I won't be able to say the word. That's also, you used it before, is about the church. Excuse me?
Pentecost?
Pentecost, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, and obviously some things to say about, our calendar, right, is that our calendar refers to the Northern Hemisphere, right? So, right, what's winter? Winter is from Sukkot until Pesach, right? And what's summer? Summer is from Pesach until Sukkot,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Is Sukkot a pilgrimage festival, not
Yep.
a high holiday festival? Just falls
Exactly.
out?
It's a pilgrimage, right? Sukkot is another pilgrimage.
So
Exactly.
what's the high holiday cycle? Just Rosh Hashanah and Yom
Rosh
Kippur?
Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right?
What about Hanukkah?
Hanukkah isn't, so, right. So Hanukkah we don't see here, right? Purim we don't see here, right? The various fast days we don't see here, right? Right, that it's, there's all, the thing about Judaism, right, is it's an oldish religion, right? So we have the holidays that make sense, right, based on the holidays in the Torah, right? And then as history goes on, additional holidays get added on.
So Hanukkah and Purim aren't either of those.
Right, those are post, right? Those are later holidays, right? Those are later holidays that have some sort of basis in scripture, right? Although Hanukkah is not actually ever included in the Jewish scripture, right? It's included in the Christian scriptures, but it's the Book of Maccabees, right? Is sometimes it's in some Christian Bibles, I think. Although you don't want to quote me on that. But yeah, so we'll get to, so next week we'll look at the non-biblical holidays. Maybe we'll look a little bit more at the pilgrimage holidays, right, in the Bible. The other two sections that I mentioned, right, just to sort of go through those. So if you're in the synagogue on a holiday, right, what we just read is what you will read. What is read as what's called the maftir reading, right? Complete the final reading in the Torah of the Torah. We read the Torah, whatever the Torah portion of the day is, right, and then we read a little bit of extra, right? So if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, right, we read the little piece about Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, right? If we're in the synagogue on Pesach, right, we read the little bit from Pinchas about Pesach. If we're there on Sukkot, right, very interesting, we read the days of Sukkot that are relevant from Pinchas. All right. So we'll stick around and do a little bit of anyone who wants to. We can stick around and do a little bit of Hebrew from our Hebrew primer, and otherwise I will look forward to maybe seeing you tonight. If you're actually, I'm not going to be there. Rachel is going to be doing the service tonight.
You're not going to do the service tonight?
I won't be there tonight. Rachel will be. I'm gonna have a Shabbos off, which I can't remember the last time I did. So I'm very excited.
Will you be there tomorrow?
You can rest. That's
What?
I'll be there tomorrow morning. Right early. Yeah. So please consider coming
Good
tonight.
Shabbos.
Rachel, she's great, and we'll switch gears and now go to Hebrew prayer book, the easy way. Okay. Great. All right. So last week we looked at the on page 2 at that list of vocabulary, right? And we learned a little bit, right, about the noun sentence, right? That in Hebrew, in the present tense, we don't have a verb form of to be, which is really, in a sense, it's a little strange that we don't have that, right? Because the verb to be is such an important verb. In fact, right, God's name, Yud He Vav He, is an amalgamation of the word to be, right, of the verb to be. So the fact that we don't have a present tense version of it seems a little strange. So Ata Melech, right, means you are a king. Ani Av, I am a father. right? Or Moshe Melech. Moses is the king. And the other thing to notice here, right, is that there is no indefinite article in Hebrew. In Hebrew, right, we have only the definite article for the. In English, we have definite article the, and the indefinite is a or an, right? And then and in languages like Russian, right, there are no articles at all. So that's one of the reasons if you are talking to a native Russian speaker, very often they will either leave out or will use the wrong article because it's sort of what makes just implicit sense to us as native English speakers doesn't make sense, right, to native Russian speakers. So that's one thing about Hebrew that you'll get used to as you do it, as you read it more and more, right, is that there is no indefinite. Okay, all right. So I think you guys can go through the exercises. As I said, I think it's fine just to do them orally. If it helps you to write in order to remember, that's great. But it can be very time consuming to write in Hebrew unless you know the script letters. So it's up to you whether you really want to. Okay. But I think the most important exercise in this book is what is exercise 4 on page 4. Right? See how many chapter 1 vocabulary words you can find in your prayer book. So if you're going through your prayer book, right, pick a couple of pages that you think are worthy of your attention, right, ones that we use a lot in shul, right, and go through them, right, and find those words. Remembering, right, that those words will sometimes have suffixes, they'll sometimes have prefixes, right, and sometimes it'll be that word but used as a root, right? So it might be a different form of the word, right? And I'm not telling you that you have to find every single, like the word yimloch, which happens fairly often in the prayer book, means he will reign, right? It's from the same root as melech, right? I'm not necessarily expecting you to locate those, but if you can, have in mind not necessarily to look for just the form that you see, but also to look for the words, look for the letters in the root. It's a sort of a good frame of mind to be looking into the prayer book. Go ahead, Ellen.
So if there's nothing before the word, you translated a.
Yeah.
If there's a hey before the word, then you translated the.
Right, exactly.
Can you put us back to people?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The problem that I have is that I have 2
Oh,
screens.
there we are.
Yeah, I have 2 screens, so I can look at all the people
Oh,
and
both.
at the same time. So
Yeah.
if it never be shy about asking me.
Okay.
All right, good. So page 5, right? Probably most of you already know the Shema,
Yeah.
right? But not a bad thing, right? To see it as, to think about what does it actually mean, right? So Shema is to hear, right?
Oh, Israel,
In Eloheinu, right, it means our God.
our God.
Our God. Right? So notice, right, that words in Hebrew, right, our God is 1 word. In English, it's 2 words. So suffixes and prefixes in Hebrew often are used instead of separate words the way they would be in English. So Eloheinu is our God, 2 words in English, 1 word in English. And the other thing to know, right, is that one of the main reasons to learn enough Hebrew to be able to make sense of the prayer book yourself, right, is that every prayer book you look at will have different translations. And the more that you are familiar with the Hebrew, the more you will be able to control how you understand the prayers. All right, good. So chapter 2, let's look at these vocabulary lists. Okay. All right, so aim means mother. Unfortunately, we see mother much less than we see father in the prayer book.
Is
Only
it or aim?
it's aim.
Okay.
And you know, but that's just you know, the legacy of, you know, our sort of patriarchal system that we've had for, you know, centuries. Bracha, very important word. So in Hebrew, bracha, right? In Ashkenazi / Yiddish, right? Bracha. And one thing that I have found to be very helpful in terms of feeling comfortable in Jewish spaces, right, is being able to do a little bit of that code switching, right, of being able to understand that words have two different pronunciations depending on whether we're pronouncing it Sephardic or Ashkenazi.
That brings up a question that I have been dealing with as I've been reviewing my primer. In addition to doing, I just picked up the prayer book,
Yeah.
Hebrew the Easy Way,
Yeah.
Yesterday. So I'm a little behind
That's okay.
in that. But one of the things that I'm curious about is I have this.
Yeah.
And, you know, my cheat sheet.
Yeah. And
so we have the letter, we have this letter, I don't know, what is it? It has the sound of S, but then we also have another letter that has the sound of S.
Yeah.
And then, and not just at the end of the word, that I understand, that's clear.
Yeah.
But an entirely different letter.
Right.
That has and the same thing with V.
Right. So the thing to remember, right, is that, you know, languages don't follow rules, right? Which is to say, right, that over time, people determine how words sound, right? And people determine what the correspondence is between a particular letter and a particular sound.
Okay.
So, and so a good example of that, right, would be the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
Yes.
Right, where in Ashkenazic Hebrew / Yiddish, right, a taf without a dot is a s sound, right, and in Sephardic Hebrew, it's a t sound, right? Whereas, you know, so what you're talking about, right, Cheva, is that actually in Ashkenazic Hebrew,
yes,
there are 3 letters
that have the same sound.
That have this sound, right? Right. And so, you know, presumably at some earlier time, there were distinctions between these letters, right? And they, over time, those distinctions disappeared and they became alive, right? Okay. And in Europe, in Yiddish influenced Hebrew, right? The elision, the elision of those distinctions was, with the S sounds, right? In Sephardic, the elision happened with the taf, right? That the distinction between the taf with a dot and the taf without the dot, that distinction went away.
Okay.
And so the thing to remember about language, right, is that whenever anyone talks about the rules of grammar, right, or the rules of pronunciation, right, any time that we think of those as prescriptive rules, right, we're setting ourselves up for a fail, right? All those rules are descriptive. Right?
Okay.
They're only prescriptive in as much as the description helps us to speak in a way that will be understandable to native speakers. In a language like English, for instance, which is so widespread,
Yeah.
I may have mentioned to this group, a couple weeks ago, someone sent me, a TikTok video. I don't really watch TikTok, but she sent me this video of someone, I think from Arkansas and someone from Sweden. And they asked these people to say the same words in English. And you would not know that they were speaking the same language.
Yeah.
Well, my son lives in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And he was walking through the office holding a bun. So he was holding it. So one of his coworkers said, "Oh," in a Scottish brogue,
yeah,
"You've got a wound there." And my son is like, and so like, what? He says, so after a bit, the Scotsman explained to him that when you are hurting, you fist up.
There you go. There you go.
So
yeah. All right.
And so that's English.
Right. Exactly. So this is a bracha or a bracha, depending on what you want.
Right.
Okay. So the word eretz, right? Very important word.
Yes.
How do you say it?
Eretz. Eretz Mitzrayim or Eretz Yisrael, right? The land of Egypt or the land of Israel is generally, those are the two.
Eretz?
Eretz.
The third word.
Right, the third word is eretz. And remember and this is actually helpful to know, I don't think it's covered here, but it's probably covered in your other primers, right? Most words where you have two of these little, I think they're called segols, right? The three dots with an F sound. If you have two of those in a row, almost always it's going to be, the emphasis will be on the first syllable of the word. Eretz.
Yes. Eretz.
But when you put but in many cases, right, when you put a ha before it, right, the land, haaretz, right, there's a vowel alteration, right, haaretz, that'll come. But just again, so that when you see in the prayer book, you might see haaretz, and you might think to yourself, oh, well, is that the same word, right? The answer is yes, that's the same word, just with just a vocalic alteration. Right? So at, the female you, right, is at. Right? The male is ata. We knew that from last time. The feminine is at. Ha is the, as Ellen already told us. Ellen Kahn already mentioned that. The word for she is he. And so I was telling someone before, right, that there was a woman who used to teach the Hebrew classes in Brookline. I took a class with her, and she would say, "Who is he and he is she?" That a little mnemonic for you, because it can be a little convincing, a little confusing, right? So just remember, who is he and he is she? Zot is this as opposed to zeh. And me is who.
How do you say who?
What?
How do you say who?
Who is me?
Me.
And ma is what? I think we probably had ma already. Oh no, maybe it was in a different book.
What is ma?
Ma is what?
Yeah.
And then obviously very important word, Shabbat.
Sarah.
Right, and then Sarah. Who's good? Who is good? She's keeping me warm. All right. So yeah. So again, so what I would recommend, right, is as you go through the prayer book, see which ones of these words you see, right? And in as much as you can, I mean, it's a little complicated to look at translations and to try to figure out what it, what word it's translated as, but it's in as much as you can do it, it can be helpful to sort of figure out, oh, that's one of the ways they translate this word, in this particular prayer. All right. So
How do you write what? How do you write what?
Ma, it's mem plus a hey.
Mem plus a hey?
Yep. With a kamatz underneath. So a kamatz is, the one that was.
Mem plus a hey for what?
Yeah. And the kamatz is the line with a tail. Okay. All right. So you guys all know what a noun is, right? A person, place, or thing, right? And then, and so you can see in the next couple of pages will be about how to do the.
Right.
I'm not going to try to explain it right this minute. Right. Oh, bye-bye, Lois. Thank you. See you soon. All right. You can read about how to manage the ha, right? What's important to remember, right, is the ha for the always comes with a dot in the first letter of the next word. First letter of the word as long as that letter can accept the dot. So it gets a little confusing. Like you can't put a dot in the aleph, for instance. Right? So there's other ways that gets managed. That's explained on page. So the dots the dots inside letters are called a dagesh.
What are they called?
A dagesh, right? And and it's as it says here, right? As it says here, that there are complicated rules why dots appear or not or don't appear. For now, we will learn. You will learn eventually which letters take dots and in what situations they might take a dot. What I would strongly recommend now is not to worry about it because you're not actually trying to write Hebrew, right? You're just trying to read it. So, so it will be helpful eventually to learn the rules because it'll help you figure out, is the dot there because of where the letter is in the word, and like or is it there because it changes the meaning of the word, right? And so there are differences that eventually will be helpful to know. But I agree with them here. Like don't get yourself worked up over it if you can't figure out why it's there and why it's not. But just understand that there are times, right, where you would expect to see a dot and it won't be there. And there are times when you are going to be surprised. Why is there a dot there? And you feel free, of course, to come to me and ask me, what the heck, Jim? Why is this dot there? I may be able to tell you, and I might have to say, I don't know. I'm going to have to ask, someone who knows Hebrew grammar better than I do. All right, so I think that's where we'll stop. Thank you all, so yeah. So if we haven't had a chance to connect, I'm very happy to. Even if you're connecting with Rachel, I'm also very happy to connect with you. And if you're connecting with me and you'd like to connect with Rachel, also, I'm sure she's willing to do that also if you ask. So, all right, go ahead, Ellen.
How many times do we connect a month? Just once a month?
The month is great. I mean, if there's specific reasons to connect additionally, I'm very happy to.
But once a month is
But
enough.
once, I think is good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.